Okay, so I was black. Okay, so he played e4, I played c5, he played d4, so he's trying to play Smith-Morrow. So I take on d4, he plays c3, and I decline the gambit and I play knight f6. It's just easier because, you know, it gives him kind of a free game to take the second pawn. I mean, with accurate play, black should be a little bit better, but kind of gives him what he wants, so kind of wanted to steer it in different channels. And plus, he was a kid, so. So I play knight f6, he played e5, knight d5, knight f3. So I can't take, obviously, my knight's hanging. So knight c6, cd4. Okay. So he has these nice central pawns, but they're a bit overextended. So I play e6, he plays bishop c4, knight b6, bishop d3, d6, take and take. Okay. So he has some active pieces, but he has this isolated pawn on d4. So my target will be that pawn. Okay, so he plays knight c. Whoops. So he plays knight c3, which is normal. Okay. So now, what do you guys think I should play here? What do you guys think I should play here? There are a couple of reasonable moves here, but what do you guys think on this position? This is kind of like the first point where I actually have a choice. I mean, everything up until now has been pretty much almost forced. Just developing my pieces, basically. But here I have a little bit of a choice. So what do you guys think here? What do you like for black? Yeah, castle seems normal. Castle seems normal. But I wasn't entirely sure what happened after castle if he plays this move.
Check.
So, how do you guys respond to this? Does anyone have any idea? Just curious. Yeah, it actually gets really tricky. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much have to take King H8. I just lose. I mean, he just moves his bishop back and mates me. So I have to take. And then Knight G5, I have to play King G6. If I play King G8, Queen H5, and I'm mated. So I have to play King G6. And now here, like H4, King F6, Knight H7,
Check.
King E7, Knight F8, King F8, H5. I'm not sure what's going on here. I mean, okay, I have two pieces for Rook, but it's... yeah, it looks scary. So I didn't really want to allow this. I mean, truth be told, I'm probably better, but like, he's starting just to go like this. So I have to kind of go like here, and then H6 I have to go like here. And it's just, I don't know, like, it's not the type of position you want, right? I mean, because, okay, even if objectively I'm better here, it's very hard to defend this as black. like, it seems like white's moves come a lot more naturally than mine. Like, my pieces are still kind of just not doing much. And, you know, his next few moves are kind of obvious. Like, he just kind of wants to lift his rook over, you know, bring his bishop out, you know, bring his queen around to, you know, h3 or something, you know, castle, something like that. So all of this didn't really appeal to me. Although objectively, probably black is fine. Okay, so instead of castling, what can I do? But yeah, I mean, technically castling doesn't lose, because that whole variation is, you know, I mean, I do have a material advantage. A slim one, but... So what can I do instead? I actually quite liked what I did in the game. So when your opponent has an isolated pawn, I've said this probably 50 million times on the stream, but what's the most important square? What's the most important square to control when we're talking about this pawn? I'm sure you guys have heard this before. Those of you who are semi-regulars, but what's the big square to control? Because ideally he wants to somehow exchange this pawn off, because it's his weakness. And so by exchanging his pawn off, he kind of opens up more lines for his pieces, and so on and so forth. Right, so you guys are absolutely correct. The square to control is this square. So the question is, how do I go about controlling that square? How do I go about controlling that square? So the way to control the square is to simply play knight to b4. And now I'm threatening to remove this bishop, which is pesky. And I almost certainly make this trade, because now I don't have much to fear from castling. But more importantly, this knight is also maybe hopping into this square on d5. And also, I'm opening up a way for my bishop to control the square, because now my knight is no longer on c6. So now I can play bishop to d7 and bishop to c6. And it gives my bishop a way out, because currently my bishop is blocked by this pawn. And notice how my bishop's also blocked by this pawn, and this knight's not really going anywhere for the time being. So it gives my bishop a way to get out, and control a nice diagonal, and also control that square. So this is actually a very thematic maneuver, this knight b4. You know, attacking d3, but also controlling d5. So in these types of positions, this also happens in like Caro-Kanns and stuff. Like in Panna Botvinnik's, for example. You know, like e4, c6, you know, a d4, d5, e5, cd5, c4, those type of positions. It's very similar because isolated queen pawn again, and black's pieces are developed similarly in those structures. So this knight b4 is something to remember. And so, okay, so I thought he would keep the bishop on this diagonal and so make it still hard for me to castle and play like something like bishop to b1. But he played bishop to e2. So now all my problems are solved. Hi. Okay. So now I don't have to worry about castling. But I figure, you know, there's no rush. So I play bishop d7 first, which is fine. Okay, he castles. And now here, I mean, no reason not to castle, so I castle. Okay, I mean, everything's going fine so far. Position's probably about equal. But I kind of like black. I mean, my pieces are a little bit better placed. And he has a weakness I don't really. Okay. So here he should actually probably put the question to my knight first. And play a3. Force me to go knight 4 d5. And then do what he did, but you'll see why it kind of made a difference. Okay, so he played this move knight e4. Okay, so this is actually a key point. So he played knight e4, which attacks my bishop. So, I wasn't planning on moving the bishop back here, just because I feel like it gives him too many squares. Like if I move my bishop back, he gets his knight hopping into e5, which is annoying because now my bishop can't really come to c6 super comfortably, because he can play something like, I don't know, even like knight g5 and start hitting me on f7 and h7 and stuff. So I was actually just gonna end up moving this bishop on d7. And so the question is, when I move this bishop on d7, do I want to move it to c6 or do I want to move it to a4? Because if I play bishop a4, I basically force b3. He can't really go queen d2 because he kind of just blocks in his own bishop. And if he goes queen e1, I can go knight c2 and fork his queen and his rook. So on bishop a4, he pretty much has to go b3. So the question is, when I play bishop a4, does the insertion of b3 help me or does it hurt me? Like, do I want to force this move b3, or should I just play bishop c6 and just put the question to his knight? It's actually a very subtle difference. I'm not sure there's actually a clear-cut answer, but what do you guys prefer? Basically, the two choices are either bishop a4, b3, bishop c6, or bishop c6 immediately. And again, I don't think I think it's a microscopic difference, but do you guys have a preference? It's very minute, but okay. Well, I ended up actually playing bishop a4. I don't know. I thought maybe him having inserted b3 makes his pawn, because like, you know, eventually he does want to play a3. So if he plays a3, then it makes b3 a little bit weaker. Whereas, you know, if his pawn's still on b2, like b2 and a3 is kind of a little bit stronger. The negative of allowing b3 is that maybe his bishop does want to develop to b2 or a3. But I always thought I had like a5. But yeah, I thought about a3 not being as defended if he plays b3. So I wanted to insert b3. Again, I mean, the computer says that bishop c6 immediately is best, but the difference between this and this is like 3/100ths of a pawn or something. So, I mean, who knows if the computer is actually right, like theoretically. Again, it's a very minor difference. I just thought that his position's slightly looser. Like, you know, now c3 is not as defended and stuff. And this actually ends up making a difference later, so I don't know, maybe it was good that I inserted it, but okay. So he plays b3, I play bishop c6, okay. So now I thought he'd probably just take on d6, and then maybe play bishop a3, and like I said, I was going to play a5 and just kind of work on the c file, work on the d file, and try to win this pawn. Because now, notice my bishop's nicely posted for like a bishop takes f3 potentially, and I can maybe win a pawn. But he actually played an awkward move. He should probably take here and be about equal, but he played this move knight d2. Okay, so now like all his pieces kind of have moved backwards. Notice his bishop moved from d3 to e2. His knight moved from e4 to d2. So notice how all my pieces have been going forward, right? My bishop went from d7 to c6. I mean, via a4, but that was just a temporary thing. But it went from d7 to c6. This knight went from c6 to b4. This bishop went up to d6. Like, all my pieces has kind of been going forward. All his pieces have kind of been going backward. So I felt really comfortable here. I mean, I felt like I was better. I mean, he has a weak pawn. His pieces are kind of jumbled. I mean, I have no weaknesses to speak of. My pieces are active. But there's nothing super concrete yet. I just need to keep improving my position. Okay, so what do you guys like here? I thought I definitely made progress, but, you know, I mean, there's no forced win. So what do you guys like here for black? I kind of just want to keep improving the positions of my pieces. So, any suggestions on how to do that? Yeah, exactly right, Progmeister. Exactly right. So notice the C file is begging for rook to be on it. And notice that, like, you know, if I can move this bishop away, I have like knight c2 ideas potentially. But that, I mean, definitely this rook isn't doing anything, and this rook belongs on c8. So this queen is not entirely sure where it wants to be. You know, e7 is natural, but it could also be the case that I actually might want to go to d7 or even c7. Maybe even f6 in some lines, like f6 to g6 even. Just try to put pressure on d4. But yeah, I mean, it's almost assured that this rook wants to go to c8. Because this f rook will go to d8, and my rooks will be kind of posted on the two half-open files. Well, one's fully open, one's half-open. So I play rook c8, which is correct and best. Okay. And now again, he should probably chase my knight, but he played bishop b2. Or yeah, he played bishop b2. Okay. So here, queen e7 is probably good, but I had an idea here. To kind of reposition this guy. So I play knight 4 d5. The point is now maybe my knight wants to come to f4. And now I can maybe start dreaming of some sort of kingside attack, because his pieces are actually not that well posted, particularly these two guys. And it's hard for this bishop to actually come back and defend as well. Like, he has to play g3 at some point, but then that weakens this diagonal even further. So I kind of just want to reposition this knight, kind of hop in the center. And also now maybe I'm eyeing the dark squares as well. So maybe I'm eyeing c3. Okay. So he plays knight e5. And here, what should I do? What should I do? I didn't really want to exchange pieces here because I felt like my pieces were better than his. But I actually missed a good opportunity. So what I probably should have done is I probably should have taken take, then I play knight f4. And so the point of this is that I'm attacking this guy twice. So he has to play something like knight f3. And then I play bishop e4. And now notice that I'm threatening like a rook c2. So he plays rook e1, I play rook c2. He takes, I take. Plays bishop d1, I take on b2, he takes on e4. And I play knight b5. And all of a sudden, all my pieces are better than all his pieces. This rook is quite active. This knight is very pesky. Knight d3 ideas are looming. And just trying to win f2. This rook can come to the c file. I can kind of penetrate. And this is very promising for me. Although it is an endgame. So I kind of thought I deserved more. It was a little overconfident. Because this is kind of simple. And it's very hard for him to defend that type of position. And it's easy for me to kind of press on because my pieces are so active. But I didn't really want to give up this bishop. So it was a little bit of a mistake on my part. I played this move bishop to b4. And my point was, I kind of just wanted to play like bishop to c3. And just try to win this pawn, kind of. It was rather brute force, but now it kind of gives him time to shore up his defenses and get more pieces involved. So I wasn't so worried about like take because now he got rid of this good knight for this bishop that wasn't doing much, and my pieces are really infiltrating on the dark squares. And now bishop c3 is a big threat, and I can kind of start to triple on the c file. So I wasn't too worried about that. Okay. So he plays the correct move here, and he plays rook c1. So he's kind of just defending the c3 square. Okay. So now I decide, okay, well now I don't really want to give myself an isolated pawn because now he can threaten to take on c6, and eventually I'm going to have to take back with a pawn. Because if rook takes, pawn takes. So I didn't want to give myself this weak pawn. So I moved the bishop back to e8. So now I have some idea of maybe playing like f6 and getting my bishop out this way. See my game 1 against where I was black, where I played the same idea with bishop d7, bishop e8, and f6. But also I just kind of want to avoid trades, and okay, if he wants to trade on the c file, it's fine. Okay, so he plays knight e4. Okay, so now he's really covering this square. But again, I kind of just want to trade these bishops because this bishop is really his only good defender of this pawn. His other defender is just the queen. So I can just I can kind of try to pile on this pawn if I can trade pieces. So I play queen e7. I could probably play knight f4 too, but I'm not really sure I want to trade like this knight for this bishop. So I think queen e7 was fine. He takes on c8, I take on c8. Okay, he plays queen c1, attacking my knight. I play knight to d6, offering a trade. He should probably just take and then play g3, just try to keep my knight out of here. Because now he can play bishop f3 and kind of shore up his light squares. But he plays this move, knight to c5, which is a little bit of a mistake. Because now, what should I do? What should I do? So it's kind of funny because this whole game, like, I've kind of been trying to work on the dark squares and trade off the dark squared bishops. But it turns out that, in a way, his best piece is actually the light squared bishop. And that's kind of like my worst piece. So I just offer a trade of light squared bishops with bishop to b5. Not something he can really refuse. But notice how, like, most of my pawns are on light. You notice that this bishop is kind of controlling a lot of key squares that my knights might want to hop into. So we trade. Okay. And now here he should probably play queen to c4. But he makes a mistake and he chases my bishop away with a3. Okay. So now he figures I have to go like bishop back or something, and now he's kind of kicked my pieces out. Okay, but what did I play here? What did I play here that was very strong? All of a sudden, all sorts of tactics are starting to work. And so here I can actually win a pawn by force, believe it or not. So do you guys see how I did that? It's actually quite clever. So, do you guys know what I did? Yeah, knight takes d4 doesn't quite work. Yet. Because he can take with his bishop. And then I'm not really winning material, unfortunately. Yeah, if I take on c5 and pin, it doesn't quite work because he always has b4. He always has b4 to kind of hold it. He always has like b4, knight d3, stuff like that, and I mean that pawn actually becomes quite strong. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful. Yeah. So Progmeister is right. Bishop c3. So bishop c3 is very strong. Yeah, knight c3 doesn't quite have the same effect. But yeah, now I'm actually threatening. Now I'm actually threatening either knight takes d4 or bishop takes d4. And the point is that this queen and this king are unfortunately placed. And I'm going to have this knight e2 at the end. So yeah, if I move a knight to c3 right away, the problem is he can just play king h1. And now all my pieces are kind of stuck, right? Like, this knight isn't actually doing anything. And this bishop is threatened, he can just play b4 and win a piece. So I can't do that. But I can play bishop c3. And now all of a sudden, everything is loose. Because now this is loose, and when this becomes loose, this is going to become loose. And now, again, I'm threatening stuff like knight d4, knight e2, and all sorts of shenanigans. So actually, he can't avoid losing a pawn here. So he should probably just take and play rook e1. The idea being that I can't really take here now because e2 is covered. But I can play a move like b6 and then maybe take on a3. So it's almost impossible for him to avoid losing a pawn here. But what he ended up doing was he played the move knight f3, trying to hold on to d4. Okay, so now is the question of what to do. Now it's tricky, because there's a few tempting continuations here. So what do you guys think I should play here? Because there are a couple of things I can try here. There are a couple of things I can try here. So what do you guys think? This requires some calculation. And there are a couple of things that are tempting, so... What do you guys think? So one thing I can do is kind of cash in immediately and take on d4. So the point is, if he does anything with this bishop, I just play knight e2 and win. So if he plays bishop takes bishop, I just play knight e2. So he has to take my knight. And now the point of this is that I can simply take on b2 and then take on c5. And now the fact that I've taken d4 means that c5 is undefended. So I win a pawn this way. But I wasn't too sure about my prospects of winning this endgame. You know, he could play like rook c1 now, and it's hard for my pieces to actually do something. You know, I have a 4 versus 3 majority on the king side, but it's hard to get it rolling, and his knight is well posted on d4, and his queen is actually not badly posted on b2, because it covers both his queenside pawns, his knight, and a rook on c1. So I wasn't too sure about this endgame. And actually, when I had originally calculated, I had only considered the move queen takes c5. And I thought after this, like knight e2, now my bishop is pinned, so I have to play rook c8, and then he can take. I have to take with a knight. Then he plays a move like queen to g5, or queen to... can't play queen g5, but like, I don't know, just even like king h1, and like, I'm kind of all pinned up. So I didn't really like this. But I found this move... After knight f3, I found this move b6. So simply putting the question to this knight. And now I'm simply wanting to, if this knight moves, I'm just going to maybe take on b2, take on a3. And now he has weak pawns on b3 and d4. So if I can take a3, it's actually probably better for me than if I take on d4. Because then d4 is still weak, and I give him another weakness on b3. So b6 is what I played, and it's actually the best move. So he plays a4 here, which is pretty much forced, or else he loses that pawn, and like I said, it's just bad for him. Okay, so now I'm kind of forced to cash in, because, okay, if I move my knight anywhere else, I'm losing a piece. So I have to take on d4, which is best. He takes on d4. Okay. So now here the question is, what do I take in which order? So I can take the knight on c5 with the queen, or I can take the bishop on b2 with the bishop. And then after I take on b2 with the bishop, do I take on c5 with a knight, or sorry, with the queen, or with the pawn? So there's like 3 different ways I can kind of do these captures to remain up a pawn. The question is which one should go first. And so it turns out that probably the most accurate way to do it is to take on b2 with the bishop. Queen takes is kind of forced. And then actually to play this move pawn takes knight, which looks odd at first glance, but the point is that this pawn is actually not that weak, and by opening up the b file, I give an avenue for this rook to come and attack b3. So like c4 is coming quickly. I might be able to hop my knight to d4 and b4 and d3, but it doesn't look very natural. So I actually elected to do the simplest option, which was to take on c5 immediately. Okay, so here you should probably play knight e2, but he plays knight to b5 instead. Okay, so I play bishop takes b2, which is kind of forced. He plays queen takes b2, which is kind of forced. And now I play the move a6, so I'm kicking the knight with tempo. Again, probably best. Okay, so here, rather than move the knight, he plays rook c1, which is a good move, because this queen is actually very well posted on c5. So it's good for him to kind of gain a tempo on my queen and use this open c file. Because if he just moves the knight on this move, I can play rook c8 on my move. And now I'm fully controlling the c file, and it's going to be very hard for him to save this. But by grabbing the c file himself, now my rook can't really get out very easily. So rook to c1 was definitely correct. Okay, so after rook c1, question is, where should my queen retreat to? And funnily enough, there's actually only 2 squares that my queen can go to. Every other square is actually defended, so I can either go to b4 or I can go to e7. So during the game, I thought that queen to b4 made a lot of sense. Because he can't play like rook c4, for example. I can just mate him. And I'm also kind of well posted attacking his b3 pawn. And I thought that my queen was kind of well posted on the square because I have control of this 4th rank. But it turns out probably queen e7 is more accurate. Because after queen e7, he can play knight c3, and I just play something like knight f4. And some of the problems that are associated with queen b4 aren't as readily apparent here. Because now I'm threatening knight to d3. And I just kind of want to get my rook out to d8 or to c8. And if he attacks this knight, I can always play e5 and kind of keep it well posted. And he doesn't really want to play g3 and weaken his king side. So kind of getting my queen out of the way actually probably would have served me better. But I play queen b4. He plays knight d4. Okay. So now here I should probably just play knight e7. Try to maybe reposition my knight. But I went for the gusto and I played knight to f4. Okay. So now I'm threatening a couple of things. I'm threatening to play queen takes knight with the idea of knight e2 afterwards, winning a piece. I'm also maybe threatening to play knight to d3. Doesn't quite work because he can play queen to c3, but it's an idea if my queen kind of can get out of the way. Okay, so he plays king to f1, covering the e2 square. And now I play the strong move e5. And now he's in some trouble. Because this knight doesn't really have a great square to go to. If like knight c2, I have queen d2, which is very strong. If knight f3, I have a move like knight takes g2, which I think is strong. So for example, knight f3, knight g2, I think. Maybe he has rook c4 here, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe he has rook c4 here, but yeah, I mean, the idea is I can go here, but okay, maybe he has rook c4. Okay, but maybe queen e4 here is strong. Yeah, this is probably really strong. Because now I'm threatening like queen d3 check and knight e2 check. So this is probably really strong. Okay, so he goes back to e2, which is actually best. And now, the question is, what should I do here? And this is probably my biggest mistake of the game. It's probably my biggest mistake of the game. So what should I play here? So it turns out that I can kind of get a dominating position with my knight. So I kind of foolishly traded here, partly because he was very short on time, and partly because I thought this queen and rook ending would be really good for me. But I should play knight to d3, and the reason is not so much to fork his pieces, but just to kind of keep this knight on d3. Okay, so queen c3 is forced, otherwise he does actually lose material. So queen c3, which is what I saw. And now I actually just play this move queen to d6. And the point is that in this position, after rook d1, e4, this knight is just very strong and very hard to get rid of. And I'm also threatening queen takes h2. Potentially. So yeah, now I can play moves like rook to d8 maybe, and just kind of worm my way in. Also f2 is weak, so if I can kind of get around to f2, I can threaten some nasty stuff. So I was a little bit worried about this type of thing, you know, in analyzing, because I thought maybe he could kind of undermine this knight, but it's actually very strong. But I kind of took the easy way out, and I simply took on e2. Okay, so he actually has to play queen here. If he plays king takes, I have rook d8, which is very strong. So he took with the queen. And I thought, okay, now I can take on b3. And I thought this would be good for me. So I play queen takes b3. Oops. He took on a6. He has to get his pawn back. And if he takes on e5, I take on a4. And these two pawns are way too strong. Just gonna queen one of them. So he has to kind of keep the balance on the queen side. So he takes on a6, but I thought his queen was out of play now. So I play rook d8, which is best. And now he's very short on time here. He's very short on time. So he makes a big mistake. Well, not a big mistake, but he makes a mistake. He plays queen to c8. So the point, of course, is I can't take because I'm mated. But I have this little resource, queen d3 check.
Check.
And now his king is forced to come to e1. Forced to come to e1. He cannot go king g1 because I just go g6, and now I'm threatening mate, which is unstoppable. Yeah, he can't really stop that mate. No matter where his queen goes back to, I either capture it and play rook d1 mate, or I just play queen d1 check. So he actually has to go to e1, which he found. Again, he's very short on time here. But now I just play g6. And so now his king is very poorly placed. And so this is actually, I have good chances to win here now. I have good chances to win here. Yeah, instead of queen c8, he should play, he should just play queen c4 actually. So I'll go back a move or two. Yeah, so here he should just play queen c4 and just try to hold this rook endgame. It's probably, this rook endgame is drawn. So on queen c4, I probably have to decline the trade and play queen b2. And then he should probably play queen c3 and again offer a trade. Again, I can't play rook d1 because I'm getting mated at the end. So I can't do rook d1 and take and win the queen because I'm actually mated.
Checkmate.
But yeah, if he just keeps offering queen trades, this rook endgame is close to a draw. So, but he played queen c8, so I played this queen d3,
Check.
he played king e1, I played g6. Okay, so now he has to be careful. So he plays queen c2, which is actually best. And now here, I mean, it's tricky. There's a lot of choices. I don't want to trade queens. But the question is where to put this queen. It's tough. So I chose queen to d5 to attack g2. Probably queen d4 is a little bit more accurate. Because I'm trying to head to f4 this way. And then from f4 I want to kind of take on h2. And also like hit d2 potentially. But okay, so queen d5 he plays king f1, which is pretty much forced. Okay, so I play king g7, which is good. He plays rook b1. And now, I thought about playing rook c8. It's probably best. The idea is if he takes, I play queen d3, queen d3 check, and then queen takes b1 check. So he shouldn't take, obviously. He should play queen d1. But I wasn't really seeing how I was making progress here, because his queen keeps defending this pawn, so I don't have any like forks. So I have to play something like queen e6, because again I don't want to trade rook or trade queens. And yeah, it's hard to make progress. Yeah, I'm not really sure what I could have done in this stage of the game to try to win. Like, it feels like I'm close to a win because my pieces are better than his and I'm up a pawn, but it's really hard to make a tell. So I'm not really sure what else I could have done here. I'll show you what happened the rest of the game. Queen d4, queen b3. So here maybe rook to d5. But I play rook to d6 just to defend this pawn. Okay, so king g1. So he's kind of bringing his king closer to getting mated, but d1's well protected. So I play h5, which was a good move. He played h3, which is good. Maybe I should play h4 here, but I don't know. I thought maybe I could play g5, g4 or something. Okay, so I play rook e6, queen b5, rook f6 trying to checkmate, queen b2, offering a trade. If I take on a4, he takes on e5, which I didn't really like. So I should probably play queen e4, but I play queen f4. He played rook e1. I don't think it's winning, unfortunately. I thought it was at the board, but it's impossible. Like, it's just really hard to make progress. Okay, so eventually we trade these pawns. I'll show you how. So queen a1, king h7. So I'm trying to get out of this pin. Queen a2, queen b4, rook b1, queen d4. Oops, not there. Queen d4, a5. So, okay, so we trade these pawns. ba5, queen a5. So now it's even harder because now all the pawns are on the same side of the board. Okay, so e4, queen c7, rook f6, queen g3, queen d2, rook f1, rook f5, queen a3. I checked with the computer. It doesn't see anything. It says I had one chance when the knights were still on. But like once the queens are off, once the knights are off, I think it's really tough. I basically have to hope for a mistake, and I don't think he made any mistakes. I mean, he made maybe like an inaccuracy, but nothing that like I could actually capitalize on. Okay, so we eventually traded queens. I'll show you how that happened. Okay, so queen f4, queen c1, and then I'll show you the trap I fell, or I tried to set for him. So rook a5, rook e1, rook a2. Wait, is this what happened? Oh yeah, right. Yeah, so he can't take here because I take here. Okay, but he played g3. I took. He took. I played rook d2. Okay, so this game went on for a long time, but okay, queen f4, queen d7, king g2, rook d4, queen f3, king g7, queen c3. Okay, he's pinning. So I played check.
Check.
He repinned. I played back. He played here. Oops. I played here. Played here. 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 Okay, so finally we traded. Okay, so then this happened. So f4, rook b4. Oh, sorry, f4, h4, rook b4, h3, king g3, rook c5, rook b7, g5, fg, rook g5. Okay.
Check.
So we got into this position.